Hey, it's me, Bobbert, and today I'm reviewing By The Ghoulies, the first Railroad game on the original Xbox. Did Rare make a good first impression to a new audience? Well, no, I'm not going to pretend on that one, but is this game an underrated gem? Let's find out.
Grabbed by the Ghoulies from Rare to make us a Donkey Kong country. Ready to eat for everyone. It's good to play together.
By The Ghoulies was originally going to be a GameCube game, but Microsoft ended up buying Rare in 2002, which means it's no longer a Nintendo company. Over 20 years later, and I'm still surprised Nintendo has let them go so easily. Anything else about this game is not really interesting, except for maybe some cut content like Ember being playable in the single player mode. She is in the multiplayer mode, but other than that, it's just mostly cut content levels and some ideas. Anyways, that's all I can find. Let's begin with the game. But before we begin with the actual game, I just want to remind you that this is the first game that's on the original Xbox, which means expectation is a bit originally high. And, well, once I talk about the game, you probably understand why it has a negative reception. And, well, if Banjo Kazooie Nuts and Bolts has anything to tell us, that Rare doesn't think highly of this game either, especially in that one level in Banjo Kazooie Nuts and Bolts. The footage you're seeing, all the Grab by the Ghoulies games in the trash can. But anyways, let's give this game an actual chance. The story begins with Cooper and Ember trying to escape the rain by going inside a mansion. The owner, named Baron von Gore, kidnaps Ember, and it's up to Cooper to explore the house. Well, not really explore, it's a very linear game, as you soon find out. Fight all the monsters inside, and rescue Ember and defeat Baron von Gore. The gameplay is like a 3D beat 'em up, where most of the objective is to beat everybody in the room to proceed to the next area. What makes GUI unique is that each stipulation is different in each room. Some is lasting a time limit, only using weapons, only defeating certain enemies, low health, and so much more. It keeps the game very interesting and help make it less repetitive. Breaking some of these stipulations doesn't mean that the game is over. It just means there's a small penalty, which is usually the Grim Reaper, which kills you in one hit, but you can also use it to your advantage. And in some battles, you need to use the Grim Reaper to defeat certain enemies. Combat does get some getting used to. Instead of using button combinations like in most beat 'em ups, you fight using the right control stick. Now, games of this current age use the right control stick as a camera, but back in the GameCube, Xbox, PS2 generations, they were a bit more creative using that stick until later on in that generation. It feels weird at first using the right control stick as combat, but it actually works pretty well, especially when you try to attack enemies in the 360 range. They can swarm you really, really quickly. Although attacking enemies may be easier, using the stick doesn't feel as great as button combination. That's the only negative I could think about, is combat kind of, well, it does the job pretty well enough at least, but button combination will always feel better to me. But I will admit, the stick is much better when using projectiles like bottles or using any kind of gun. Visually, the graphics are good, especially on the Xbox Series X, and the enemy design are creative, like the vampire chickens, the imps, and even something generic like the skeletons. Each one of them are filled with personalities. The side characters like Marsupial, Fiddlesworth, and Bobbert are entertaining as well. I feel like they work better in a kids cartoon show rather than a video game. And of course, like in most of our games during the time, there are Easter eggs of the older franchises, especially of Banjo-Kazooie. You see them all around the game. And I always enjoy these, but I feel like they overdid it in this game in particular. It's like they try to tell all the Xbox audience that really Rare that made all these awesome games, even though they're probably only going to recognize Banjo-Kazooie since Nintendo owned Donkey Kong. Now, you may have noticed the soup cans all around the stage, assuming that I put in those footage during the editing process. Those are temporary power-ups that can help or even hinder your progress, like freezing the enemies, Mini Coopers, and even getting one-hit KO. And there's also a few negative, like reverse control, slow motion, and reduced health. My only advice is try not to use all of them at once. Sometimes you can go back to a section and you may not get that soup can, but some fights may be difficult, but most of the time they're really an endurance test, so make sure you use them at the right time, especially during the harder enemies. The most common negative I hear about this game from other critics and even reviewers is that the game could be a bit too repetitive at times, which I agree, but only for a little bit. But beat 'em up can be repetitive by nature. At least that's what I think. I'm not a huge fan of beat 'em ups. I'm not saying that they don't spice things up a bit, especially if you have like a good combo or landing tree or difficult enemies with unique patterns. But beat 'em up can tend to be very repetitive, just like puzzle games sometimes. Plus, the game is short if you only play the story mode, so I say that's a part of it because it doesn't overstay its welcome. And, well, unfortunately, being short means that this review is going to be shorter than usual, which, it's not a big problem to me personally, but I feel like the more I talk about this game, the more I spoil stuff or feel like I'm repeating myself. Plus, there are only 2 boss battles, one being the Goblin Ember, which I guess is probably the closest to a boss battle compared to the other enemies you fight, and the other is the Baron himself. I try not to spoil too much on the final battle, but it's the only fight that uses different strategy and recognizing patterns. It's a bit difficult at first, but my best strategy to you is to find all the soup cans and using them at the exact right time. Now, after defeating him, the final part of the game is rescuing all the children that you see all over the mansion, saving them within the time limit that you play as Marsupial, beating up all those imps. I told you this is going to be a short review, and I apologize if that part of the review ended so abruptly, but overall, I think By The Ghoulies is an okay game. I really like the different objectives to progress throughout the game, but as the first game on Xbox, well, the first Rare game on Xbox, it did not make a strong first impression in my opinion. Now, you gotta remember, this is the first Rare game that they promoted as the makers of Donkey Kong Country and Banjo-Kazooie. That's what it says on the video game box art. So it was not going to reach that level of expectation from Rare fans. And although Xbox will still try to find its audience, later on we'll find out it's more of a mature audience like Halo, and later on Call of Duty, Gears of War, and many rated T and rated M games. So overall, I'm glad that I was able to finish the story of this game, finally play it, because I started gaming during that time, during the Xbox, PS2, and GameCube era. So I really missed out on Rare's new era in the Xbox. Although I do enjoy this game overall, I can understand the people being negative about it. It is a pretty short game, so it really doesn't leave a lasting impression on you. And this is, like I said over and over again, the first railroad game on Xbox, and compared to the other games they made on the Nintendo 64 and even Super Nintendo, this is probably not the game they really expected. If this was released on the GameCube, it probably wouldn't be praised too much, but it wouldn't be negative as well. At least that's my assumption. It would be a stopgap title before the actual big games like Donkey Kong Racing, if if Nintendo kept Rare, or maybe even a Banjo-Tooie. But anyways, I really recommend giving it a try. It's on Real Replay, and I'll be honest, it's a bit difficult to recommend it to people who are fans of beat 'em up because it doesn't play like a traditional beat 'em up. But if you're looking for something different, I really recommend giving this game a try. I hope you enjoyed this review. Obviously, I'm a bit rusty. I kind of rushed through this video, but I finally got a retrospective out, and hopefully I can continue this momentum. I'm not entirely sure what my next game is going to be, but I have different ideas, especially with big anniversaries coming up like Sonic, Pokemon, even game consoles like the Nintendo Wii. Those are the three that I have, cooking up in my mind. But anyways, hope you like the video, subscribe, and tell me your thoughts on By The Ghoulies. This is me, Bobbert, and I catch you guys later.